Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 135 of Discourse and Magic with Andi Gladwin. Now, Andi is someone who I've wanted to get on the podcast for quite a little while, and we've had some scheduling overlaps, but we finally figured out, and he had a ton of info, which I'm super excited for you to hear. But for me personally and selfishly, there was a lot that I wanted to ask him that had to do with some of the overlaps in both of our lives. So he's also somebody who started a magic company with somebody else, with a partner. He also did it when he leapt for him it was from work. For me it was from university. It was a leap to start a project with somebody. He also performs magic regularly, and he also has to deal with things like all of your life being magic and how you work on and how you deal with that, and whether that's something that you like or something that you have to work outside of, and also how to deal with when you're doing so many different things in magic, like running Vanishing Inc. and also performing and also planning conventions and things like that. You really have to focus on allotting time to do certain things. Otherwise, parts of your responsibilities fall at the wayside. So Andi had incredible advice for that, managing those sort of things. And really, it was just an incredible interview. Such a fun guy to get on and chat with. Fortunately or unfortunately, he did the interview in a Starbucks. So apologies for some of the sound stuff that's going on in the background, but maybe it'll feel a little bit more like a fly on the wall conversation. And it was sort of the only way we could get such a great internet connection. So my apologies, but I hope that you can push through the sounds of a Starbucks and listen to some of the amazing material that he has. Anyways, here it is, episode 135 with Andi Gladwin. I'm super excited to dive in and hear all about him and his magic. We are here with Andi Gladwin. Andi, how are you?
Happy we could do this because I'm a fan of the podcast. I'm a fan of what you do. So hopefully this is going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, me too. And I'm a fan of what you do as well. And I told this story briefly at when we interviewed Josh J. But at the very beginning, when I started the podcast, one of my first instincts was I was like, if I was going to talk about magic, and I'm going to talk about books, let me have like a way that I can make some money when I sell the book. So the first thing I did is I sent you an email, and I was like, can we set up an affiliate program where if people buy books through my link? And you said, sure, absolutely, here you go. And then I realized very soon, and this is something we're going to talk about later, that really I wasn't about making money at that point. Really, it was just important that I just interviewed people and did good content and created good magic. So I turned off all that stuff, and but just it's fun that we had an origin story together as to when this podcast was started. But let's hear about your origin story in magic. So how did you get started?
You know what? In a kind of similar way, in that I quickly realized that magic wasn't about money for me. In fact, one of my kind of marketing heroes is a guy called Gary Vaynerchuk, and he has
I know him and love him very much.
Fantastic. And I've been a fan of Vaynerchuk for I think 12 years now, like way before he was famous in the marketing world. And he has this great saying, which is legacy over currency, and that's how I live my life. So I didn't used to be a professional magician. In fact, I left school, and unlike all of my other magician friends, I got a job. I got a real job for 7 or 8 years, and I love that job. But
doing what?
I used to work in IT. I used to work for a web hosting company, and I jumped around a lot in the web hosting world, file storage world. So I started off in tech support, and then moved quite quickly through the company to be a company trainer, and then a web developer, and I finished the company as UK product manager 8 years later.
Wow.
And yeah, I jumped through that company mainly using kind of my wits alone to convince each manager as I went through that I was good at the job I was trying to sell myself for. But I absolutely loved that job. But I realized something really important, which is that job was taking so much of my time that I was getting left behind in magic. I wanted to be the best magician I could be, but I couldn't do that if I had a job that was getting in the way. So unlike my friends, actually, I didn't desperately want to be a professional magician, but I got there in the end because I desperately wanted to be a good magician. So the two had to come hand in hand. And I was recently reading back some old interviews in Genie magazine, and I read an interview with Tamariz where, interestingly, he said the same thing, that the reason he became a professional magician was to have longer to study magic, to have more time to study magic. So that's my origin story. And yeah,
So the quick question that I have about it is, what was the either financial or work net that you were jumping into from leaving the job? Because you said you didn't want to be a full-time magician. So when you dove into it, was it you taking on a bunch of shows? Was that you starting Vanishing Inc? Was that you, like, what was up and coming that allowed you to say, let me stop this job and do this? Or was it nothing, and were you planning on booking gigs and starting to get shows?
question I get from a lot of magicians who want to do this themselves is, but weren't you scared? Weren't you nervous that you wouldn't make the money? And the answer is a complete no. I was not scared at all. In fact, I got a mortgage the same month that I left my job. And the reason I wasn't scared and the reason I could take that kind of financial risk was because I planned ahead. I built, a business plan.
Right.
I understood where I was going, and I'd managed to get my gigs to a point where I was earning as much money as I was while I was working. And
Right.
that's a tough thing to be in, because now when you're doing as many gigs as you are, working an office job that is not 9 to 5, is often 7 a.m. till 8 p.m.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to get into that position, because otherwise you'd be taking too much of a risk. So,
So
yeah.
I'm glad that the answer was a something, because a lot of people don't think about that safety net, right? They jump from one thing to the other, and they didn't already start getting those gigs. For me, when I graduated university, I went right into doing magic, and that was because in university in the summer I was going on a tour at summer camps, and I knew that at least somebody wanted to hire me in the summer. So I had 10 more months to get someone to hire me, for the other 10, but I knew my summers would be booked out. And that was just the safety net that I had. And I encourage people to do that, because I get a lot of, I got a question once, someone asked, he was like, should I quit university and go be a professional magician? Like, obviously I can't answer that for you. Like I don't know, can you do it? Like, I don't know, right? So I think it's really important that you have something, or some sort of idea, or physical proof that you can keep going. So I love that. And let's talk a little bit about that. So you started doing magic, and what was the journey? You started performing a lot. Where did you perform? How did you get really in there?
Yeah, so I lent on a lot of my friends, is the truth. I'm very lucky that I have a large circle of magician friends who are professional magicians, who were more than happy to give me gigs that they couldn't do. They would,
Yeah.
help me out with all of that kind of thing. So for the first year or so, while I was working in parallel with my real job, as it were, I was, mainly leaning on friends who were giving me lots of gigs, and gigs working alongside them, so that I could observe them and start to understand the nuances of doing walk around and close up magic. This is at kind of corporate events, parties, award ceremonies, at weddings, and shows like
Mhm.
that. These are very popular markets in the UK for close up magicians. And of course, we can't ignore the fact that I just launched Vanishing Inc. with Josh at the same time as this. And that,
So yeah, so let's just talk about the timing of all of that, so we can put it on perspective. So you left your job, and then how long were you doing gigs until you launched Vanishing Inc?
so actually, Vanishing Inc. had launched 6 months before I left my job, but
Okay.
I wouldn't have been able to leave my job to solely support myself through Vanishing Inc. At that point, Vanishing Inc. was a very small company, and yeah, I think back to that legacy over currency thing. Vanishing Inc. was never supposed to be what it is now. I'm so
Right.
happy and so proud that it is what it is now. But our motivation for Vanishing Inc. was to kind of give us an outlet for our own creations and our own books
Right.
and that kind of thing. And
Same as the podcast.
exactly, right. And that's, I think, if you have the right motivations, often you'll grow beyond what you ever expected to.
Yeah.
And so I left my job not expecting to ever rely on Vanishing Inc. full time. So I thought it was going to be gig, and lots of gigs. But that's changed a lot now, because now Vanishing Inc. is what I'd consider to be a medium sized company that
Mhm.
requires a lot of my attention and Josh's attention. So while I still believe it's very important to perform, and I perform as much as I absolutely can, now it's essentially like I have a day job again in a way, because Vanishing Inc. Requires a lot of attention.
It's funny because that's slowly happening with me with the Toronto Magic Company, where, I go from being like, wow, I'm a magician and I get to do shows. Wait, and now I'm producing shows and I'm producing 6 shows a week. During the day, I've got to do work and I'm like, well, this is just like getting a day job, except it's in magic.
It
So it's
really
funny
is.
because people think that being entrepreneurial means escaping doing work. And there are some ways where you can position yourself where you've got other people doing the bookings and other people doing, you have agents and stuff. So all you have to do is just show up. But you still have to do work. You still have to show up and go to work every day. No matter what the job is. So I like that, and it's really interesting and exciting. And one of the reasons why I was pumped to interview you is because there's so many similarities about that we both thought of, in the sense of, I want to do magic gigs, but I also want to start a company. And, starting a company with somebody else, so that you can work off each other and create and things like that. So there's a lot of similarities, and I like the way you think. So let's talk about the very beginnings of Vanishing Inc. and what it was for you. And then we'll talk about sort of what's happening now, the big news that came out recently, and a little bit about your day to day. So at the very beginning, you said you started it to sort of have fun, create stuff, have a platform to do that. It was never meant to be this. What was the feeling? What was it day to day? Like, were you guys recording videos to put out? I feel like, I always remember Vanishing Inc., but I don't remember it starting. I just remember it being there.
You
It's
know,
like a dog. You don't remember not having your dog.
in all honesty, I don't even remember. It's 10 years ago. This April will
Right.
be 10 years old.
Yeah.
But I know you interviewed Josh, and so I'll try and be careful to give just my perspective, not the full picture, because you'll hear that from Josh's interview, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it started because we both felt a small frustration with the fact that we would do all of this work with our own products, but then the finishing touches were in somebody else's hands. So if Josh created a trick, he would sell that trick to a magic company who would produce it, and then they would decide how it was distributed. And we talked, we'd been best friends for a long time. He was staying with me in London at the time, and we just decided, maybe we can give this a go. Maybe we can just create a company to produce our own tricks, and perhaps a few of our friends might like to join us along the way. And
Right.
little did we know that
Right.
a few of our friends would become many of the world's best magicians.
Yeah.
So the motivations were just almost to have an outlet for ourselves, and we just realized quite quickly that there was a need for a magic shop that cared about quality over quantity.
So that's awesome. And I already know how I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But let's fast forward to now. And obviously, there's big news. So tell us what just happened with Vanishing Inc. and what that means, and maybe what people can expect in terms of the future. What's going on.
Yeah, we just have acquired Art of Magic, Dan and Dave's company. And Dan and Dave are focusing so much on Art of Play that they realized they didn't have enough time to dedicate to Art of Magic. And Dan and Dave have been longtime friends with Josh and I for many years. So it seemed like the right fit for us to run Art of Play. Art of Magic, not Art of Play. That's what they're doing. We've taken over the sites. We now own the company. Dan and Dave are staying on as consultants, which is amazing because I love those guys and I love their vision in magic. So I'm expecting to learn a lot from them and really start to understand their viewpoints in magic. But from this point onwards, we now run Vanishing Inc. as well as Art of Magic, and there's no
Are things
plans.
kept separate?
Yeah. Right now, there's certainly no plans to merge them into one. I do think probably long term there will be maybe some kind of way of, if you're a Vanishing Inc. customer or an Art of Magic customer, there'll be like a midpoint where you can watch all of your downloads in one place. Maybe that'll happen. I don't know. That there seems to be a desire for that from a lot of customers. That's what
Well, my question, the reason I was asking is, To me, I mean, it's the same, or it doesn't really matter if they're together or different. I mean, Facebook owns Instagram, but I still have two different usernames and logins, so I don't really care. The
Right.
question is are they is Art of Magic fundamentally different than Vanishing Inc? And if so, how so? Or is it really now, it was different and now they're extensions of themselves? Like how are they different or the same?
We're still working that out right now. It's a really important question. How are they different? And to me, they are slightly different in the styles of magic. I
Mhm.
consider Art of Magic to be often a lot more difficult sleight of hand card magic, whereas Vanishing Inc is a bit more wide reaching than that.
Yeah.
So, and it's very download focused as well. So I don't know for sure yet, and I don't mean to sound kind of coy with this, but I don't know exactly. I'm
It's
still
it's
talking to
very
our
fresh.
customers.
I'm trying to get the scoop. So
You really are. You're doing a good job of getting the scoop. But
okay.
we already have lots of plans of how we're going to improve Art of Magic for the customers, improve the buying experience, improve the viewing experience, and just bring basically the years and years of experience we have of running now one of the largest magic shops in the world, and bring that technology and experience into Art of Magic to make it just a much smoother experience. And yeah, there will be some crossover between the two in some really interesting ways that I'm very excited about. I think both companies will grow because of uh, our kind of joint passion of the two companies.
I hope so, and they're two great magic companies that I stand behind with all my heart. So it's
Oh,
very
thank you.
exciting. So here is a maybe a difficult question. So you spoke about at the beginning when you and Josh started the company that you wanted to have a platform that you could create your own magic and release your own magic without it having to be at the hands of other people. Right now in the magic world, there is a uh, oligopoly, which is for anybody who didn't take an economics course, which is like a monopoly but multiple, of giant magic brands. So there's the Vanishing Inks, the Art of Magics, the Illusionists, the Theory 11s, the Penguin, and then it starts thinning out. And apologies if I'm forgetting any of the big ones. I'm not. I'm. But then it starts thinning out. So somebody else is now living the same situation that you and Josh were in 10 years ago, where they're like, wow, I have my own magic. What do I do? Do I give it to the hands of one of these companies? Do I keep it for myself? So, my question is, what do you, in 2018, 2019, right now, what do you say to somebody like that? Do you tell everyone to start their own magic company? Should people release their own stuff? Or should everyone maybe put their faith in the magic engine that exists right now through all of these companies and allow it to develop through there? There's a lot of people who are very thankful for the Popular Days of Magic magazines because that was a great threshold to find out if your magic is good. Like Josh saying no, your stuff can't get in the magazine was a good threshold for people. So is it good? Is it bad? What do you recommend for somebody?
It's such an astute observation, and it's one that I worry about every time I tell the backstory because, yeah, essentially what I'm telling you is what I don't expect of our creators, right?
Right.
I'm telling you, I believe I wanted to do this so I'd have full control of my own products, but then I'm saying to creators every day, you should work with us because of these reasons. And here's why. I've spent the last 10 years, and Josh has spent the last 10 years, and our team have spent all this time learning about this industry and being able to, I think, and I really believe, raise the bar of magic instruction and magic products since we've been involved in the industry. So I hope that if creators think that we fit their mindset and their ethos, I hope that they'll work with us. And now, many people have gone their own way, and we've helped them with that. We've helped many of our friends release tricks, not through Vanishing Inc, but just released it on their own. But if we can increase and improve the quality of magic, then we will do it in any way we can. And that's whether it's by releasing a trick or a book through us, or whether it's helping somebody do it, go in their own way. So, yeah, basically, I will only encourage somebody to work with us if I think they fit within our ethos, and if they feel that they fit within our ethos as well. And a recent situation occurred with an extremely well-known magician who we essentially we're at the final point of making a deal for a very big project that would have probably done very well financially, but we ended up parting ways because we didn't feel that this magician's heart was in the right place. We felt that they
Right.
actually were doing it for the money, and that's not how you produce a good product. So we parted ways, and we've
So
not been afraid to do that.
there's two things that I want to highlight in this. One that we sort of have brushed over, and then one maybe something new that sort of has to do with the 2018 aspect of it all. So the first is I like what you're saying, and I think that there is a trade-off, and it might even be the same trade-off as what we were talking about before. I mean, hypothetically, if your audience of magicians is as big as Vanishing Inc is, which it isn't. But hypothetically, if it was, and you sold the same number of copies, then the question is, are you trading on people knowing who you are, or are you trading on sales? Or, like you can probably make the same amount of money by selling way less copies from your own than through a company, whatever the company is, because obviously they're producing and selling and all the different fees that come out of it. But maybe you'll sell more copies with the company and more people will know who you are. More magicians will know who you are. You can end up on more lineups of magic conventions or whatever it is that your goal is for. What was the quote? Legacy over currency, right? So you can really start digging that direction of legacy. So I think that that's one aspect that people might often have to pick between. Can you comment on that? Do you think that's right? Do you think that's way off and the money is pretty good for a first time creator, or I don't really know.
Yeah, I think there are many reasons to go with a company, whether that be Vanishing Inc or any other company. But the main one being that you get to choose. You get to choose a company that meets your ethos. So if you feel like you've got a flashy download that doesn't fit Vanishing Inc.'s audience, then you could go to somebody else, to another magic shop. But if you've got a book that you want to be the most gorgeous book available, then maybe, just maybe, you could come to Vanishing Inc. So
Right.
the cool part is you get to choose. We don't force anybody to work with us. We don't oversell to people. We let them come to us, and we kind of offer them the best we can offer them. And that was something that Josh and I couldn't find when we were producing our magic and looking for magic companies to sell it for us. We couldn't find people whose quality levels matched our quality levels. So that's kind of
Right.
why Vanishing Inc started. So could you make more money by doing it yourself? In all honesty, I would be surprised knowing
Right.
kind of what our
Maybe, but
creators.
probably not.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. But the key thing is not the money, though. The key thing is, could a successful magic production company get a better product, get more exposure? 100%. Because
Right.
we have a large team now in Asia producing our products. A large team whose job it is to find the best quality materials and the most flexibility and find the way to make the product the best it can be. That's in Asia and in America and in Europe. So yeah, I just think some magic production companies are better equipped.
And it is most often the case, and it's sort of changing my perspective of it, of not thinking of there as being a few giant magic behemoths, but rather thinking about it as these are different publishing houses, right? You can self-publish a book, or you can give the book to a publishing house, and they're going to help you make some decisions that are very impactful, like what that book looks like, and who puts a comment on the back cover saying how good the book is, and where it's being seen, and all of the different things like that. So sometimes handing those things off to the pros is an important thing to get it in the eyes and hands of the right people. And I also like what you're saying about you have to pick. Not have to. You get to pick. You get to pick who you think what you do speaks with the most, and who you want to represent and stand behind and stand with.
And one other thing that I've never heard other people talk about, but by going to a magic production company, you also get the ability to find out whether or not it's actually a good product. Because
That's true.
if no magic production companies will take on your product, maybe it's not meant to be marketed. Maybe maybe they're wrong also. But
And that's a huge point. I've had people send me things as like, hey Jonah, here's a free copy of something that I'm about to release, and I'm like, and I don't even know how to tell them, right? Because I'm not their, I'm not, they're not selling it to me. So I'm like, don't release this, right? I'm like, this isn't worthy of being released. And I don't know how to tell them. And I'm like, better for you to send this to Vanishing Inc. and have them tell you not to release this than you release this on your own and have people, tarnish your name.
Right, and also for the good of magic as well. Like we take a real responsibility on board for what we do. That we're part of ensuring that magic is of high quality. So we won't take on a bad product or an unethical product or anything like that. So yeah, we try and be as careful as we can to only produce real quality magic.
And that's a good aspect of the company as well, which is only putting good stuff that you like into the world, and only making sure that you're not a cause of looking back. There's a lot of negative comments that people have about the 2018 and 2019 world of Magic, which we'll talk about shortly, but it's good that as somebody who has such a big role, you're trying to make sure that you do your part. So one last question about Vanishing Inc. and producing Magic is, let's say someone's listening to this and they have a trick or book or lecture notes or whatever. The question is, what makes good magic content? What makes a good magic release? I mean, I can get more specific and say what makes a good magic book or what makes a good magic trick, but really I just want to know, like, when you're selling or releasing your magic, what does someone have to look out for before they do that?
You know what? It's not even about looking out for something. It's about having performed it a lot. I can see the difference almost immediately. When somebody sends me a video, I can spot a trick that they performed once or twice, or a trick that they performed 1,000 times. Josh and I would never, ever release a trick personally that we hadn't performed 1,000 times. Like, why would you? You don't understand all of the details until you've done it 1,000 times or more.
Yeah.
And here's the problem. Performing a trick 1,000 times is extremely difficult. So that's the main thing. I think too often, and by too often I mean almost hourly on some days, do we get submissions from people who have just created a trick and think that they're ready to sell it. You're not ready to sell a trick until you've performed it hundreds and hundreds of times. So that's the key thing. Basically, you'll learn everything you need to know in performance. And that should be the goal. Nobody should ever create a trick to sell a trick. People should sell a trick because they feel that they've got it to a point where other magicians could benefit from using and learning their trick.
And that's always a question, like, every trick is a version of another trick. So the question is, like, how much value do I need to add to this trick before it's worth releasing? Right? Like, how much new does one need to add to the trick? And the answer that I keep coming back to is, like, is it a valuable addition? Is this an addition that is worth anything?
Yeah, and sadly that's subjective, but
of course,
we've become, Josh and I and our whole team, in fact, have become pretty good at spotting where the value lies in a trick. I often subscribe to the Mike Close theory of it should at least include improvements in the presentation, in the effect, and the method to make it a publishable trick or a shareable.
I like that theory. So my last question about Vanishing Inc. is to hear a little bit about your current day-to-day. So it sounds and feels, and from everything I watch and understand, like you lead a life full of many different things. You perform, you run the company, you perform on like TV, and I hear about, and obviously Vanishing Inc. is multifaceted, and there's a lot of people that work there, and obviously what you have done in the 10 years of this company has changed. But what does your day-to-day look like right now? And particularly what's so interesting to me is it feels like Vanishing Inc. is run from anywhere in the world, like between you and Josh, wherever, whenever, it feels like it's being run from anywhere and everywhere around the world. So talk to me about what your day-to-day is and how you manage working on so many things all at once and juggling life altogether.
Well, that was the main starting point for Vanishing Inc. I read a book that maybe many of your listeners have read as well, which is Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Work Week. Which I do recommend still, but it's quite dated now. It's interesting how quickly that book dated. And a misconception of the 4-Hour Work Week is that you would work for 4 hours and that's it. And trust me, I definitely work more than 4 hours a week. But the lesson behind that book is that you should be able to run a company from anywhere in the world. and I can run a company anywhere in the world, Vanishing Inc. But interestingly, I haven't. I've lived in the same town for the last 10 years. But actually, as a little experiment, I'm moving temporarily, only for a few months, to Las Vegas next year, as a
Oh,
trial
great.
to see what happens when I'm not
Yeah.
in the same place.
Is everything going to crumble,
Exactly.
or are you going to be able to hold things up together? And
And I think everything will hold together extremely well.
I think so too.
So
Yeah.
I work from my laptop. I can work from anywhere. I travel out of the UK for the last 3 years. I've left the UK at least once a month, often twice a month, and yeah, there's been no problems.
Yeah, I had
So
a feeling.
so we're fine in that respect. But as to what a day to day looks like for me, it's almost impossible to answer. I can give you today just for fun. I'll give you the things I did today. So last night I went to bed at about 11:30 p.m. and by 2 a.m. I was on my phone doing two things. One, I was texting Josh because Josh had just filmed for Jimmy Fallon on his show, on
Yeah.
the Late Show. So we were
Yeah.
texting. My wife was going crazy as I was sat up in bed
It was
texting
awesome.
texting Josh. But then also I was texting one of our employees who had a bit of a crisis, and I was helping with that as well. And then, of course, I went back to bed, went back to sleep a couple of hours later, and I was up at 8 a.m. ready to jump into my emails. And emails traditionally take me between 3 and 4 hours a day, each morning, to reply to. I get a lot of emails from the team, from outside of management, from people looking for advice creating tricks, from people wanting to publish tricks, or somebody has some questions. One of the performers has questions about the conventions we run, that kind of thing.
Right.
So I get a lot of emails, and most of my day is essentially, I call them other people's problems, basically. Most of my day is dealing with other people's
Putting
problems.
out fires.
Exactly. And then, I got to work on some projects today. Projects my favorite thing about what I do. So I was, laying out a book today, for example.
Mhm.
And then just before we hopped on this interview, as you know, I had to delay by a few minutes just because there was another fire that needed to be put out urgently. So that's my day, really. It really is just jumping
Wow.
on and off tasks. Uh, I traditionally start work at 8 a.m. I don't really take a break other than to see my family for maybe an hour or two in the evening, and then I work through mostly until 11, 12 at night. So there's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the beauties of this podcast is I get to ask questions that are selfishly things that I'm struggling with right now, that to people who I think are well qualified to handle those things for me. And one of the things that I'm struggling with right now is I am struggling so much. I run the podcast, I run the Toronto Magic Company, and I struggle so much to find time to sit down and create magic. Now, I do a lot of performing, but I'm just performing my act. And I have a show, the newest trick in the book, where I have new material every week, but I end up chasing my tail to put stuff up there because I'm so busy doing other stuff. And we're going to start talking shortly about some of the performing stuff that you've done that are really awesome. But I just want to know, like, how do you set time aside to work on performing if you have 4 hours worth of emails? And more specifically, like, how do you shut your brain off from thinking about the company, the seats, the sales, the book, the layout, the door, the email, the convention, and work on like where to put your pinky or how to stand or watching your footage back? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I feel it because, you may have noticed I didn't mention any performing or practicing in that day today. But
Right.
luckily for me, that's not an average day, and I really actually do try and put time aside for practicing and working on more. People expect me to say working on new material, but actually working on old material more,
Oh, but you know, yeah.
which I feel is a lot more important than working on new material. A few things. First of all, something I hear all the time from people is, well, you must just have more hours in the day than me, or you must sleep less than me. And the answer is no to both of those things. I just make more time than most people. So I rarely watch TV. One of the jokes that that the Vanishing Inc team have, and some of my friends have, is I don't watch movies, and they constantly mock me for that. But a movie is 2-3 hours long, and that that's a large chunk of the day for me that I could be working. And now I say it almost sounds a little bit sad, but if I need to make time for these things, then I will, because I'll just cut stuff out like that other people do. I don't play games. I don't play movies. I watch movies. I don't watch TV. I just get the work done when it needs to be done. But the great thing is, when it's quieter, I have all the time in the world for all that stuff, because I have a company that ticks over by itself. So I can pull back if I need to, or I can just work really hard when I need to. But I've kind of taught myself the ability to focus, and I think this is something that a lot of magicians could learn, is just to focus on a task. I will sit in front of my computer, or I sit on my card table working on the trick or a move, and I will just focus on it, and that's so important. I don't get distracted easily. But the main thing that does distract me, of course, is having a team of a decent sized team of employees who need my attention.
The distracting part is running a company.
Right. So for that reason, and I realize this is a luxury that I have, and not everybody will have, but for that reason, I'm currently building a rehearsal studio that will be disconnected. We bought a house recently that we moved house, and it has this kind of disused building at the end of the garden that is absolutely disgusting. But we're having it renovated so that I can use it as a rehearsal studio and disconnect from everything. So that's awesome. That's the big key, right? Is to disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, like, you read all these books about focus, and it's like, turn your phone off and put it in another room and charge it, and then go do the thing. And like, that's all fine, except I'm running a company, right? So, you really have to plan, like, my phone is going to be off for the next 4 hours. Please, I cannot put out your fires. When I'm back online at 8, then I can put it, or whatever, right?
Exactly.
So,
but one thing I've been considering doing, and I'm almost ashamed of myself that I have to do this, but to put in my diary, rehearsal this time. So I kind of have that time blocked out, and I don't put anything else in there. But I make time to rehearse just as I make time to write magic books, or I make time to lay out books, or I make time to meet with our team. When the time needs to be found, I will find that time. And actually, that's something I've learned a lot from working with our creators. A lot of magicians I work with don't seem to get stuff done. That's if I could make one observation of many of my magician friends, or many of the creators we work with, it's that often they need a lot of nudging to get stuff done, whereas I never want to be that guy. If you are relying on me for something, I promise you I will get it, not only when I promise you, but earlier than I promise. And that's such an important feature of, I don't know whether it's a feature of being, in my position, but it's an important thing that I feel not enough magicians follow through on.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably something you learned in corporate, in the corporate world, to actually do things. Because I know it happens. A lot of magicians, we're all the like hanging out, relaxing, jam on magic type. So
let me give you one actual useful tip, though, because I feel like what I've given you is just what works for me. But here's a tip that you can definitely do if you want to focus on getting something done, and that's, I have particular jobs for particular places. So, for example, I fly a lot, and I will save writing up magic tricks for the plane. So that's the time. The only thing I do on planes is I write up tricks. The only thing I do on trains is I edit books. So I have particular places to do particular jobs, and that really helps me compartmentalize. So I know that next week I'm flying for, sadly, it's about 30 hours worth of flights, but actually that's good because I have a book that I need to finish. So I will be spending that time writing. So particular jobs for particular places, it really does help me. And that's how I managed to keep up a monthly column in Genie magazine. And I'm just about to start another column in Genie starting January, all about quitting your job and doing magic professionally.
Well, it sounds like you're gonna have to book a few more flights. It sounds like you have to do more traveling so that you can have the time to write those articles.
But it doesn't just mean to travel, right? It could just be that you go to the coffee shop once a week, and that's where you do a particular job you've had to
totally.
So it's such a useful tip that really has helped me focus my work.
Yeah, and a lot of people, I joke about a lot of people, they think about writing down a script for their trick, and they think like, I have to go lock myself in a hotel for 4 days and sit there and do that. And like, if that's good for you, great. But more likely, the better thing to do is to find a coffee shop and get into a habit, and start working on it bit by bit and piece by piece. And yeah, get into a like, this is where I go to do this thing. You get a whole new mind space, and that's something that I'm going to try for me, because I work in everything all together in the same space, and it all blends, and everything reminds me of what I saw yesterday,
Right.
which was the ideas I had yesterday.
Two last tips.
On the,
Can I give you two last tips that you might
no,
find
go
useful?
ahead.
One is I also have days for certain tasks. So, for example, on New Year's Day, that's the day I always organize my notebooks. So I go through and just tidy up the tricks, join the tricks that I need to,
Oh,
to
nice.
re-identify certain tricks that I think, oh, I started work on that and I never finished it.
Yeah.
So that's where I tidy up my notebooks on New Year's Day, every year, New Year's Day. And then finally, a to-do list is without a to-do list, I would be nothing. So that's the most essential thing I use as a to-do list. I use an app called Wunderlist, but I'm moving over to another app called Asana that I've been using a lot lately. But still,
Yeah.
having a to-do list is the absolute most important thing in my life for work.
It's so funny. Like, I feel like all of these interviews, like when I really get to the crux of things, the things that we learn are things that we should know. Like, do your work on time and write things down and then to do them, but it's things that we develop out of habits back from when we were in school and we actually did those things. And we need a little bit of someone to shake us in the shoulders and be like, if you want to get things done, write it down and then do it. It's like, oh yeah.
A to-do list.
I remember
A
that.
to-do list will change your life, and I mean that. It's so crazy. It's such a small thing, but it's everything to me.
So one of the things I wanted to talk about, because my feelings were correct in your day to day, which is there is a wide variety of magic things, and mine is very similar. But one of the issues that I'm having is everything I do is magic, and I'm like you. I mean, I don't have a TV. I watch a lot. I mean, I pay for Netflix, but I don't have a TV. Like, and I don't watch a lot of that stuff. I don't watch a lot of other people's content. I'm not watching a lot of YouTube videos. I mean, there's one person I watch the news, and that's really it. And otherwise, I'm doing work or I'm relaxing because I did so much work. So when you're meeting with people or hanging out with people that aren't magicians, or when you have to lead a life that isn't magic, one of the reasons, one of the things that Tyler, when he left the podcast, is he wasn't really happy about how self-filling all of magic was, and magicians had nothing to talk about but magic. And so how do you do that when you spend so much time in magic and you don't waste time on things like TV or movies or anything like that? Where do you go? What do you do for yourself in your brain to get outside of it all?
Yeah, I have other passions outside of magic. One of them is stand-up comedy. I love to watch stand-up comedy. So
Awesome.
that's one of the things I do. But yeah, I'm going to be honest with you. Maybe Tyler would hate me, but over the years, because of the way my life is, most of my magicians now are most of my friends are now magicians, because
Right.
I travel a lot, which means that when my group of friends from school that I used to hang out with, when they meet up, often I'm not there. They hang out on the weekends. Often I'm performing on the weekend.
Right.
So
It's true.
I've actually found that I've naturally gravitated towards magicians as friends because they are in the same position as I am, and often I may see them at a convention, or we may hang out for a day or two together. But here's the interesting thing: my closest magician friends would be friends regardless of magic. So
Right.
I like having, for example, Ben Earl is one of my close friends. I like having him come round because we can spend a whole day without talking about magic, and my wife can hang out with us, right? My wife hangs out with us, and she's not. Why are these guys just talking about card tricks all the time?
Right.
So that's the important thing to me. I do spend a lot of time with magicians, but that's because we lead the same schedule. But we don't have to talk about magic, and often we don't.
I think that's a great answer and a great approach, which is, if you run magic companies and perform and love magic and love doing magic and everything like that, then you shouldn't really try to necessarily get away from it, but instead you should just be more well-rounded. And if all of your friends are magicians, that's great, because it means you probably see them more often than somebody who has friends that have a job that requires a different schedule. So I like that approach. I want to talk a little bit about your balloon act, and particularly first of all, that we're able to see it on video. It's nice to be able to talk about an act like that, but really it fulfills a lot of the things that I have recently been playing with and looking for in magic that I do, which is that it is visually exciting and entertaining. It is what I've been calling theatrically funny, which is that it's just funny because it's existing, right? It's not a punchline. It's just so funny to be able to see, and then it's entertaining outside of the magic, and then the magic is incredible. And I'm finding that so many tricks is so much magic is just a really good trick and a really long, boring, drawn out presentation about nothing, or the opposite, a really exciting presentation, but a trick that is the ending is telegraphed from a mile away, and it's quite boring and whatever. So talk a little bit about the creation of that trick, and then maybe just so that people can hear about some of the growth, maybe some of the development, or maybe some turning points in the creation of that trick, or some aha moments.
Yeah, well, that's a trick that actually fits that brief perfectly. Of all my tricks, that's the one I can use to illustrate my struggles the most, because that trick is about 10 years old, but it didn't start how it's finished, basically. There's a magician called Rob James from the UK. He just said to me one day, "Hey, you should get inside a balloon. It would be funny." Because I'm a naturally awkward person. I don't move smoothly like Josh does, for example. I'm kind of an awkward guy. I'm a bit tense at times, and it's just, you have to embrace who you are. And his observation was, maybe it would be funny if you just got inside a balloon. So I tried it. I got inside a balloon, and at that point, there was no trick, and it went badly wrong, really, really wrong.
It's so funny that there was no trick.
And there is a video of it somewhere. Luckily, it's.
Oh, I'd love that.
I can't find it, but one of the things I learned quite early on is you need a big room to rehearse that trick. And I tried it in my living room with my wife, and basically the balloon, all of the air went out of the balloon, and it sucked around my whole body, which was not a fun experience. So that was an important lesson I learned immediately.
That's hysterical.
But so the visual was there, and obviously I didn't create the visual of getting inside a balloon.
Right.
But I started to look at all of the other videos of all of the other acts, and they all did the same thing. Here's what's interesting. Every single person who's ever been inside a balloon that I've been able to find, which is hundreds of people, did it to music, dancing around, bouncing the thing on their head, and basically just pulling funny faces. Sometimes they end with a costume change. But I realized that needs to be something magical, but also, how can we flip this? How can we do something different? So I decided I would talk, because people want to hear from a guy inside a balloon. Like, what does that feel like? Why are you in there? Or what life decisions led you to get to this position? So that's where the idea for the act came. And it's easy to write jokes about being inside a balloon. And one day, a couple of years ago, Ben Earl and Danny Buckler and myself, we hired a function room in a hotel, and I just stood inside the balloon, and we basically just started making jokes about me inside a balloon, and that was half the act created in that time.
Oh, that's brilliant.
So, if I was sat here right now and you could see me in a balloon, you would immediately start making jokes about me being sat here.
Of course. And half of it would be gold, and I'm sure that half of the other jokes came from performing it and someone shouting something from the audience. You'd be like, done. Like that. Yeah, that's way funnier than anything.
I hear that a lot from magicians, and that hasn't happened for this trick. But that's, I've seen that before, of course, and I accept that audiences always feed great lines and great ideas for tricks, for sure. Mm-hmm. But this was just basically joking about the situation, not trying to write a script as such.
But I love that. I mean, what a simple way to, I have an act that every time I perform it, I'm trying to pad it with more jokes. And what a great strategy to just sit down and think of all the obvious funny jokes about the situation. Maybe not obvious, but all of the funny jokes about the situation, and all the ones that you and your, three best friends who you like to have a laugh with, everything that you guys can think about, because your two or three best friends who can poke fun at you, that's going to be the best line that you come up with.
Right, and it just so happens one of those guys is a professional stand-up comedian, so I'm lucky there. But the first 2 hours of jokes were dumb, and then we built from there.
All the obvious.
Exactly, all the obvious ones. Once all the obvious goes, then that's when you get the good stuff. And in fact, Tamariz says that the tricks he creates in the first 2 hours of creating magic, he tends to disregard, and it's the ones after that. That's where the gold begins. And I kind of, I find that interesting with the balloon trick. So that's how we wrote the jokes. But then there's still the trick. There's a lot of people have got inside a balloon before, but the tricks have never really been as strong as they should be. Of course, the obvious answer is to do a quick change, as people have. So I ended up using that quick change as a prediction. But then I was talking to Andrew O'Connor. Andrew O'Connor is the producer behind Darren Brown and a lot of other great TV shows.
Right.
And he was producing a show at the time called The Next Great Magician in the UK. And he said to me, I would put this trick on the show, but I have a challenge for you. You have to change into something more interesting than what you're doing. Previously, I would change into a football player or a soccer player.
Yeah.
And he said, it has to be bigger than that. And just off the top of his head, he just said, it should be a diver. And that was it. He was right. He was so right. That I learned from a man whose life has been creating great visuals for TV, that it should be bigger and more interesting. So as soon as he said that, I said, I accept your challenge and I'll be in touch soon to appear on your TV show.
I'll be a diver.
And it turns out I probably shouldn't have accepted that challenge, because that is a much more difficult trick to do, because now I have a lot more things to deal with inside that balloon. Because to step back a bit, we're now about 7 or 8 years into the history of the balloon at this point. But those first 7 or 8 years were really difficult, because the balloon would pop on stage. It would burst. As I was learning how to use the balloon, it would pop. And can you imagine being the end of your show is pretty risky, in that if at any point where you're trying to climb into a balloon, it bursts, you know an ending for a show. And I have many horror stories of appearing on shows, including in big theaters, and the balloon bursting at the wrong moment. So it was a real challenge for me. And I'm, in a way, I'm proud of myself that I didn't quit, that I kept pushing through. So I essentially had to create my own techniques for manipulating the balloon. But then they kind of went out the window, and I started to involve the diver situation with a whole oxygen tank and flippers. And
to reinvent it again.
Exactly. So that was a stressful few weeks, because we were filming the TV show in a few weeks after Andrew challenged me. So yeah, that was tough, but I got there in the end with a lot of help from a lot of great magicians, such as Barry from Barry and Stewart, my friends Morgan and West, Andy Nyman, Josh. It was a lot of friends I called on to get that done, but in the end we got there, and I'm so pleased we did.
So there's a few different things that I want to pull from that. So the first is me too. I'm also fortunate enough to say that all of my best lines came from someone else's mouth. Like someone else said to me, another magician said, here, say this, here, do this, here, all of them. So I'm very lucky that it's not just my brain to have to reach into to find more lines, but I have other people to work with. So I'm very thankful for that. Another thing that I want to highlight is the routine aspect, and what you were talking about starting with the balloon and sort of just doing something without a punch and then getting a punch. So something that I know that James Allen talks about a lot, I know that Ben Train talks about a lot, and something that I have been sort of putting into my being and I think is worth sharing in this moment is the question, what is the magical payoff? And I'm always looking to add interesting visuals and moments and things to my show. And I would be the kind of guy where someone says, you should get into a balloon. And then I'm like, okay, like right now I do the balloon swallow just because it's so hilarious and visual. I love it. And one of the aspects when you're introducing something that is visually interesting or new or you haven't seen before or whatever is just ensuring that there is a magical payoff. And it sounds like it took you like legit 9 years to get the right one, but I think that that journey is important, and being able to feel it and say, there's something I like here, there's something good here, and hacking away at the magical payoff and the jokes and really earning being able to get up on stage and do that act to get to a place where it is an act and it's something where it all logically makes sense as an act, and it's not just things that there's tricks where I do where when I get off I'm like, there's still not enough magical payoff in that, right? That's more of a joke. that's more of just an interesting moment. So sometimes it takes 9 years to put all of those pieces together, but get a whole full-rounded visual trick that get it all.
And you know what I've learned is that certain friends are great at certain steps of the trick. For example, I don't think you'll mind me saying this, but Josh is not somebody who, when I go to him with a stupid idea right at the start, Josh is not normally the guy to go, oh yeah, and you should do this, this, and this, and this.
Right.
Because often I will go to him with these ideas, and I do share them with him, but I expect him not to like them because normally they are just dumb sound bites at this point. I should do a trick hanging upside down, and it should be this, this, and this. And at that stage, that's too early for him. But I have another friend, Danny Buckler, who is exactly that. I go to him and I go, I should do a trick hanging upside down, and he, goes on to a million different ideas.
Just think of all the ideas.
Whereas Josh is, I'm so lucky to have him as my best friend, because when I have that trick, when it's, when I know exactly what I want to do, he's the guy to look at the details and pick through, what if you did this, or maybe you should change that, or if you just change that word, that's going to make it a 10 times better trick, and things like that. So to be able to recognize your strengths, the strengths in your friends, and to have them help you in those ways is a real benefit.
Yeah, I love that. And I like it. It sounds like you have very specific friends that help you for very specific things. And that's an interesting tool for magicians. I know a lot of us are surrounded by incredible people, and some conversations with some people end up pushing the needle forward. And sometimes there are conversations that don't, right? And you need to figure out, maybe this is someone who it doesn't really work out to jam out ideas with, or maybe he's really good at tweaking a script, right? Or whatever the case may be. We are sort of nearing the end, and we've got a whole bunch of wrap-up questions that come at the end of the podcast. So one of the first is, in order to keep the podcast going for eternity, we have each guest recommend another guest that should be on the podcast.
Let me think of some people you haven't interviewed. I think you haven't interviewed John Archer, if I remember right.
We have.
You have? Sorry, I missed that one. How about Benjamin Earl?
We have not.
You should interview him, one of the best sleight of hand magicians, not just of our time, but of all time, I believe. And also, I mentioned him several times, but Danny Buckler is probably a name you don't know that much about, but perhaps the funniest magician you will ever speak to. So there are two guys that, if you don't interview them, I will be very annoyed.
Well, done and done. Consider it something that's on the list. And Ben Earl is someone who is on the list, and we get questions for that very often. So I really like that. One interesting question, and I say interesting because I'm really thinking about, from your perspective, from seeing things as through Vanishing Inc. for so long. So what is something in 2018, 2019 magic that you enjoy that's happening? And what's something in 2018, 2019 magic that you don't enjoy? I know we didn't talk a lot about sort of the social media age and different things like that, which is something that we like to talk about. But is there some aspect of all of what's going on in 2018 that you really like, and some aspect that you could do without?
Yeah, so one thing I really like is that video is now such an important medium that, if you create a trick, or you sell a trick, or you talk about a trick, you better be able to back it up now, because people are going to want to watch you perform it on video. And I love that. I love that magic is no longer a written medium for sharing your tricks, right? It used to be that you would publish a book of your tricks, or you would submit a trick to a magazine. And I remember, I would read a trick in a magazine and think, oh, it's an okay trick. And then I would see somebody do it, and I would be so fooled or so impressed and think, why didn't I see that? So that's one thing I love, the fact that we get to now see magic. It's a visual medium for when we're learning tricks. Obviously it's a visual medium for when we perform it, but to be able to learn magic in a visual way, I think is great. Something I don't like. Sorry, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to say, is there anything that you don't like?
I'm truly struggling to find something I don't like. I love magic. I love everything about it. I don't like the politics that sometimes comes with magic, but in general, I love everything about magic, and I can't think of anything right now that I think is bad, other than the obvious things that you would have heard many people say, bad magic.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? I think that it's a great approach, and it's one that we take as well, where a lot of people are really down on, they're like, oh, I hate all the releasing and all that, things like that, and really the way that all economics works is they change because that's the status quo, right? So anyone folding their arms and furrowing their brows about magic on Instagram, all they're going to get to do is furrow their brow, because it's none of those things are going anywhere,
Right.
right?
If I'm down on
So
one thing, I'm down on the people who are down on magic.
I love that. I totally agree, and that's something that we often get into on this, which is like, stop hating on magic and not hating on what people do and why they do it, because people are in magic for a ton of different reasons. One of the aspects that we do at the end is the question of the week. So you can use this as either something that you're trying to. By the way, because this is something that I took directly from Gary Vaynerchuk, right? So this is a question of the week. So something that you can ask the Discourse in Magic audience, either something that you want to hear from them, like you want your ear to the ground of all these different magicians who listen to the podcast, or who, usually people don't have this that big of an audience at their own disposal. But anyways, if you have a question for them that you want to hear, or a question that you want the magicians to ask themselves.
Can I give two? Can I give one of each? Is that cheating?
Absolutely.
So the one that we should all ask ourselves, I think, is what are we going to do this week to give ourselves more time for magic? What can you do to get more time practicing, performing, rehearsing, creating, improving your magic? So that's my question for ourselves.
I love that.
And that applies to me as well. I'm going to think about that. What can I do this week to give myself more time to work on magic? And then secondly, this is what I'm genuinely interested in, only because of the way this conversation has gone. The thing with me is I do so many different things that we focused a lot on Vanishing Inc. So let's focus the question here. What do you look for in a magic shop? Because I'm intrigued by that. Because I talk to people a lot about that, but everyone has different views. So what do you look for? And I want to read the answers to these questions, because maybe there's something that all magic shops out there could learn from.
I love that. I love both of those. And just to comment on them both. So the first is, I love the question of how can you make more time for what you're doing. And no matter who we are, if we're in magic, setting time aside for this art or business or whatever is going to give us value. And particularly, if you listen back to this episode, the most valuable tips that you gave were Gary Vaynerchuk, Tim Ferriss, get this thing to write to-dos, do things on time, block out time for the things that you need to do. They're all things that have to do with scheduling your time and organizing yourself and working on the things that you care about. That's what 4-Hour Work Week is all about. That book that you were talking about, that's what and that's what, when we were talking about setting a to-do list, and it's so that you can accomplish the things that you want to do, and your eyes can be as big as your goals are as big as your accomplishments, and you're not overshooting. And like you said, the amount of people that you're waiting on to send you the material because they're still they didn't set time aside this week to put more time in magic. So I really love
ultimately
that.
My goal is to free up time to work on magic. That's if I could be on a desert island with just a deck of cards, I would be there, as long as I can take my family and friends with me. That's what I want. I love just to practice and perform magic.
I love that. And one of the things that I wanted to comment about the magic shop is I really love the way, and maybe it's across the board, but I feel like I only hear it from you and Josh, but the way that you refer to Vanishing Inc. as a magic shop, which it is. But, a lot of the magic online there, it feels like major magic retailers or a magic, associate, someone where you buy things and buy downloads. And I don't know, it doesn't feel like it's a shop the way that we've considered a magic shop. But I consider Vanishing Inc. a magic shop, and I really like, and whether or not they all are shops, which they are, or how you think about it, I like the mentality of thinking about those as, they are magic shops. What can I give you? Like, what can I do for you as this magic shop? What are you looking for in a magic shop? And someone could say, I'm looking for a brick and mortar store, but someone else could say, I'm looking for a great relationship with the people that own it, because they have their ear to the ground about magic. Right?
Exactly. And I'm genuinely interested. It's not something I've publicly posed before. So yeah, let's see what people come up with. And I'm not looking for praise for Vanishing Inc. I'm just looking for, what do you choose where you buy your magic from?
I absolutely love it. The last thing is plugs. So obviously, people know to go and check out Vanishing Inc. And not only just to give two specific resources that you have, and mind the sounds of keyboards clicking so that I can get the names of things. But the first one, which I obviously remember, is to go and take a look at Magic in Mind, which is the best download in the entire world of Magic that is free. Like the fact that there's no money to get this thing is out of this world. And everybody should go to Vanishing Inc. and just go download Magic in Mind because it's the reason why this podcast exists. Reading that and just being like, there's not enough of this in the world. And you won't even make it all the way through that set of free notes without your brain turning in on itself. And the second thing that I'll really recommend, because I read it as soon as it came out, whatever it was 2 years ago, is the free ebook that you wrote about going pro, which basically has all of the information, but more importantly and more specifically, the mentalities. And which is if you're going to make the jump about doing Magic full time and going pro, and something that I wish we would talk about. Maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more before we end, but it's really an incredible resource for more than anything, just to like internalize what the new life is and how to conduct yourself and the way to think about it. So those are two free amazing resources. But aside from those and just Vanishing Inc in general, Andy, is there anything that you want to plug where people should go?
No, I'll mention one thing I have coming out. I think it's going to be in a month or 2 months' time, which is a book called The Card Magic of Edward G. Brown, which is a book that was published in the 1940s. It's published in the 1970s about a magician from the 1940s called Edward G. Brown. And I republished it along with a separate book of my thoughts on this book. The Card Magic of Edward G. Brown, I think is one of the best card magic books, but also one of the most underrated or perhaps underappreciated, or people don't even know about this book. There are only 500 copies printed, and it's very expensive to buy on the secondhand market. So I've republished it, and it comes with all of my notes on the history of the book, the history of the tricks, and much, much more, including my versions of some of the tricks. And it's even an unpublished Divernon trick that I've put in this my separate book that comes with it. So look out for that coming soon. But otherwise, yeah.
That's outstanding. And if you know anything about Magic, the word on the street is always that the place to get a trick to fool a magician is from an old Magic book that no one's ever heard of. So here's someone waving a flag and saying, here's an old Magic book that no one's ever heard of. So it's probably a good thing to go and get that. And is there anything else that you would like to say to Discourse in Magic while you're here? Sorry. You know what? Before we do the wrap up, I did want to talk again or a little bit about going pro. I know we spoke about your journey, but is there any quick sort of elevator advice that you can give to somebody who is really thinking about it? Maybe they're on that fringe of making the decision. Maybe they're like, staying up at night thinking about it, or they're like looking at the numbers and saying this could really work. What's your piece of advice or elevator advice for somebody who is thinking about going?
Yeah, the big advice is not to rush it. I think you have to study the process of going pro. It's not an instantaneous thing. It's a gradual, two different paths working in opposite directions. One you gradually leaving your job, and one you gradually making Magic more of your focus. So I don't think you should ever make that instinctive, yes, I'm going to do it right now decision. I think it takes a lot of time and a lot of planning, but it's achievable and it's wonderful. I have not looked back at all. I'm not one of those people who left my job because I hated working in an office or I hated working for the company. I absolutely loved my job, but I'm so happy I made the decision to go pro and do Magic full time. So don't rush it and make sure you consider every aspect. But also, here's the big thing: it's undoable, right? Just because you leave your job to do Magic, it doesn't mean that's your vision and focus for the rest of your life. So if it doesn't go well for you, then at least you can fall back on what you've already established before that.
And know that you tried it and then didn't like it because you hated being on stage that often, or whatever.
Exactly.
Whatever the situation.
Doing Magic professionally is very different to doing it as a hobby. But one thing I do find, aside from how to go pro, is one thing I find is for my friends that have left their jobs, they consider that, oh great, I have all this free time now because now I quit my job and I have to do 2 hours magic every other night or every a few times a week, and that's it. What a cool life I have.
Right.
Well, then you've just wasted your opportunity, is what I'll say. Because imagine having all that time to do magic, to work on new material, to push your existing material forward, to get bigger, better gigs, to do all of these exciting things in the world of magic. So, yeah, view going pro as the thing that helps you spend more time working on magic.
And part of the advice that you had there about going slow is true regardless. Like, let's assume that you're a magician who is good enough that people want to hire you again next year, and if they do, then it's going to take you a few years to build up a full roster of things where you can have a full year's worth of calendar, right? Like just running the basic marketing numbers, if you reach out to 1,000 people and you convert 1% of them, that's only 10. But if you reach out to 1,000 every year and all 10 of those rehire you, then it only takes 10 years to have 100 guaranteed bookings a year. You know what I'm saying? So like, some things just take time. They just take the time.
Right, exactly. And the one thing I advise young magicians to do is to get a real job beforehand. I use real job kind of ironically because, trust me, being a magician is really hard work. But you can learn so much from getting a job straight after school or university or college, whatever. Like, I learned the things that have allowed me to create the things I do now by having a real job. For example, I used to work for this web hosting company, and the other people that worked for that company were programmers, the best programmers I know,
Right.
who taught me how to program, marketing people who taught me about marketing, designers who taught me how to design. You can learn so much from having a real job. So I really encourage.
Amazing. I love that advice. And the last and final thing is our magical PSA. So, is there anything that you want to tell, warn, encourage, discourage to all of the magicians of the world?
Just have fun. That's what this is about. Ultimately, this is about having fun and doing great things. So, yeah, it's a cliche, I know, but that's the biggest advice I can give. Have fun and just do
I mean,
your best
it's a
work.
cliche, but cliches are cliches for a reason. And if you're not enjoying this, then don't do it. And if you are enjoying it, then do it. And one of the things that I like to say is do more of the parts that you're enjoying and less of the stuff that you're not enjoying. Unless if you're doing this full time, then you probably don't have that luxury. But if any part of it is for your joy, then you can really maximize all the fun
Right.
parts.
It's such a great thing to be in. Such a great community. Conventions are great, or speaking to other magicians is great. So just have fun. That's the biggest advice I can give anyone for pretty much anything.
Amazing. I love that. And I am super excited to. I will see you at Magi Fest, I believe. This will be
Oh,
the first
great.
one.
Well, let's make sure we
that I'm at.
we
Yeah.
hang out. Let's do it.
Absolutely. And a big, huge thank you to you for coming on the episode and sharing everything. Even when I gave you some of those hard questions about why somebody would pick Vanishing Inc. after everything you told us, and I think you gave us a great answer and a really encouraging one. So a big thank you for coming on and answering all of the
A
questions.
bigger thank you for having me. So, and thanks to everyone for listening. If you've got this far, then I'm pleased. I've done my job. So, thank you, everyone.
That's exactly what I was going to say, which is a big thank you to them. And we're going to be sharing some fun stuff on Instagram, and we're going to start posting those question of the days that people are asking, which means both of your questions are going to be up. And if you're listening to this, head over to Instagram, and in the next few days, if it's not already, it'll be up there to go leave your answer and let us know what your answers are to Andy's questions of the day. Other than that, thank you all so much, and we will see you next Thursday.